The training hall of the GSV Eternal Meridian smelled like recycled air, machine oil, and the quiet tension of species who had never truly needed to fight for survival until humans arrived. Commander Vextheri of the Galactic Coalition forces stood at the center of the padded arena, his four iridescent arms folded with practiced authority. Behind him, 40 recruits from 11 different species watched in silence. Linthians with their bioluminescent crests dimmed in focus. Korath with their granite gray exoskeletons standing perfectly still. Even the aquatic Seleni, encased in their mobile water suits, had gone completely motionless. All of them were watching the two humans at the far end of the hall. "I want to be very clear," Commander Vextheri said, his translator clicking through the syntax, "about this session's protocol. No mercy in sparring. Full contact. Hold nothing back. I want to see what each of you is truly capable of." He had said these words 14 times before, in 14 previous training cycles. Every species responded the same way. They performed vigorous but controlled exchanges, pulling strikes at the last moment, demonstrating technique rather than true violence. Even the Korath, whose species had once leveled continents in territorial wars, instinctively modulated their force the moment they sensed a sparring partner in genuine distress. It was, Vextheri had privately concluded, a fundamental feature of civilized sapient life. True predators learned restraint. True warriors understood boundaries. Then he had been assigned two humans. Sergeant John Mercer, 6 feet 2, built like the load-bearing wall of an old earth warehouse, cracked his knuckles and turned to look at his sparring partner. Private Sarah Okafor stood 5 feet 5, which in the coalition meant she was approximately average height for a human female. She had a calm, almost meditative expression on her face. Her hands were loose at her sides. Her dark eyes were tracking Mercer's posture the way a geologist reads fault lines, cataloging stress points, predicting where things would break. Commander said no mercy. Mercer said, rolling his neck until it cracked twice. "I heard him," Sarah said. "You good with that?" She looked at him. She did not blink. "John, I grew up in the Cascade Mountains. I killed my first black bear at 13 with a hunting knife because it had my little brother's arm in its mouth. I did search and rescue for 4 winters. I have had bones broken in 3 countries. I am extraordinarily good with that." Mercer grinned. It was the grin of a man who had found exactly the kind of sparring partner he had been looking for since joining the coalition forces 18 months ago. "Okay," he said. "Don't hold back." "I won't," she said. "Don't hold back on me either. I'll be annoyed if you do." Commander Vextheri watched this exchange with moderate interest. He had learned to read human body language somewhat. The shoulders, the stance, the jaw, and both of them looked genuinely relaxed. Probably they would perform a competent but restrained bout, same as always. He signaled the start. What happened in the next 90 seconds was later reviewed 17 times by the Coalition Medical Review Board, twice by the Interspecies Ethics Committee, and once, unofficially, on a personal data slate, by Vextheri himself, during a sleepless cycle when he was trying to understand what exactly he had witnessed. Sarah moved first. She did not telegraph. There was no winding up, no dramatic shift in stance. One moment she was standing still. The next she had closed half the distance between them in a single explosive step and driven an open palm strike into Mercer's solar plexus with the full torque of her core behind it. Mercer took the hit, absorbed it, actually, because he'd seen the step if not the strike, and grabbed her wrist on the follow-through. He pivoted, using her momentum, and threw her. She landed, rolled, and came up swinging before her back had even fully left the mat. The Linthian recruits' crests flared bright gold, their biological stress response. 3 Korath instinctively stepped backward. The Seleni unit nearest the arena pressed its water suit against the outer wall. Commander Vextheri stood completely still, because in 22 years of coalition military service, he had never seen 2 people fight like this. They were not performing. Mercer caught a kick on his forearm that left a bruise visible even through his uniform. Sarah caught an elbow to her cheekbone that snapped her head sideways, and she grinned and drove forward into the clinch instead of retreating, because she had calculated, correctly, that moving into the strike's origin point would put her inside his guard. They grappled. They hit. They threw each other. Sarah took a shoulder to the jaw that would have knocked any of the Korath recruits unconscious from sheer force differential. She shook her head once, spat blood onto the mat with the casual efficiency of someone removing an inconvenient piece of debris, and immediately attempted a leg sweep. Mercer sprawled out of it. He was breathing hard now. His left eye was swelling. "You good?" he asked. "Fantastic," she said. There was blood on her teeth. She looked thrilled about it. At the 2-minute mark, Commander Vextheri said, "Stop." Neither human seemed to hear him. "Stop," he said again, louder, with the command resonance that had made 4-star generals flinch. They stopped. Both of them were breathing hard. Sarah had a split lip and was going to have an impressive bruise across her left cheekbone by tomorrow. Mercer's eye was swelling shut, and he was favoring his right shoulder. They were both standing. They were both grinning. "That was," Vextheri began, and then paused, because in 22 years he had never needed this particular sentence. "Not what I meant." Mercer looked at him. "You said no mercy, sir." "I said no mercy. I did not say no restraint. I did not say—" He stopped again, looking at Sarah's bloodied lip. "Private Okafor, you are injured." Sarah touched her lip, looked at her fingers. "Little bit, sir. Nothing structural." "Nothing structural," he repeated. "She gave as good as she got," Mercer said helpfully. "Probably better. My shoulder's going to be a problem for a week." "I noticed," Vextheri said. He became aware that the rest of the recruits were looking at him. 40 pairs of eyes from 11 species, all waiting to see how he would respond to this. What the acceptable coalition standard was for 2 humans beating each other bloody while smiling about it. He thought about what he knew of Earth. Deathworld, highest gravity classification for a habitable planet in the current registry. Axial tilt that produced temperature swings of 90 degrees in a single cycle. Fauna that had evolved in direct competition with the dominant sapient species for millions of years. A species that had, somehow, in the middle of all of that, decided to develop agriculture, philosophy, art, music, and also, apparently, the concept of doing this to each other voluntarily for fun and personal improvement. He thought about the coalition's standard sparring protocol, which had been designed with the implicit assumption that sapient species would naturally self-limit violence during training because violence was understood as costly and dangerous. He thought about Sarah Okafor killing a bear with a hunting knife to protect her brother. He thought about John Mercer absorbing a full-force palm strike and immediately thinking about how to use the momentum against his opponent rather than how to retreat from the threat. He made a decision. "Everyone," he said, to the full assembled group, "watch these 2 again. Watch the footwork. Watch the clinch entries. Watch how they read each other's weight shifts." He turned to the humans. "Can you do that again? Slower." Narrating. Mercer and Sarah exchanged a look. "Sir," Sarah said carefully, "if we go slow enough to narrate, it won't look the same." "I know," Vextheri said. "But I want them to see what fast looks like when it is not held back, and then I want them to understand why." He paused. "I owe you both an apology." Mercer raised an eyebrow. "I said no mercy," Vextheri said. "I did not mean it. Not the way you mean it. For 14 cycles I have told recruits that, and they have all understood something different than you did, because they are not from a planet that forged them in actual danger." He looked at them both steadily. "You are the first recruits I have had who took the instruction literally. That is not a failure of your understanding. That is a failure of my specificity." Sarah wiped the blood from her lip. "So what do you actually want, sir?" Vextheri looked at his 40 recruits. He looked at the 2 humans, battered and grinning and completely unafraid. "I want," he said slowly, "everyone in this hall to understand what it looks like when a being fights like survival has always been personal." He nodded to them. "Again. But this time, teach while you do it." Sarah and Mercer squared up again. She looked at him. He looked at her. "Ready?" he said. "Born ready," she said. "Literally. Earth thing." And the hall watched, in stunned and reverent silence, as the Deathworld children began to explain what no mercy actually meant.